Hey, what's up, guys? You are about to watch a section, the last section actually, of the Babbling Pastor podcast. In the entire podcast, we're talking about criticism. This last section, we're talking about who to take criticism from as a pastor, or if you're in the local church, what that means in regards to you giving some sort of constructive feedback or criticism. So hopefully you find this helpful. Let's get into it. That's an entire, that's a... Pastor, I don't think you understand. I have a hard enough time paying attention. That's going to make it
Yeah.
At that point, my feet would be like, I'm sorry, your nap's interrupted. I apologize. No. So let's the very end here. So I think what we've covered is in church stuff right now, right? So everything we've talked about so far, I think, is very inside the local church, that sort of thing. And one thing I would be interested to discuss as we kind of close out this section, right? And just to review, let's review real quick, is that we've talked about the idea of, like, obviously criticism's coming. You should have people around you that are helping you sort of process that criticism in a very close circle versus a wider circle. You should make all effort, whether you be a congregant or a pastor, to have those building up conversations for maturity and really thinking through and not really doing knee-jerk reactions for the benefit of everyone, right? What would you do? And part of all of that, I guess, has been considering the source. We've really come back to that a lot. And I want to continue that theme, considering the source and considering, how the world is set up now as far as the internet. Everybody streams services. Everybody, or most people, not everyone, most people stream services. So let's say, and I don't know, I'm throwing this out as a hypothetical because I don't think it's probably happened, but let's say it does one day. Somebody streams your service. Somebody says, hey, I was over here in Kansas. I saw you preaching and you said this thing that I disagree with. Obviously we have to have considering the source here. Obviously, you're not, Craig Groeschel from Life Church, there's bigger pastors, bigger names are going to get much more criticism. So as a hypothetical, let's say you get some emails from people from outside of your church. Obviously we're considering the source here, but how would you take that? Because we do live in a digital age where anybody can watch your stuff. Anybody can email you. Anybody has access to you, indirectly, I suppose. So how would you consider that coming to you from somebody, some blow Joe out in Nowhereville that you've never heard of before? Has that happened? And then how would you take that, I guess? Because interesting time we live in.
Yeah. I do not get, no, I'm just kidding. I think, so first of all, that's not, and I think rightfully so, that's not something that I keep up with, on the regular, right? So if so, this would have a better chance of happening because of a podcast that I do as a pastor here. Because more people take that in than watch the sermon or whatever, because that's like, who has 50 minutes or whatever. So, but either way, no matter what it is, it's still a digital age. And so the first thing that you have to do, I think, is understand. So there's a trend, right, going on. And you very likely have had to deal with this because of your podcasting and your YouTube videos. There's a trend right now where, like, churches will lodge complaints or sue or those kinds of ridiculous things, because somebody said something mean about them on the internet, right? Or critiqued them in some way they didn't like. And I'll say, first of all, that kind of thing actually shows that the criticism was probably correct, first of all. And secondly, though, that's something that, like, when I understand that, whenever I say something in the public sphere, I have then opened myself up and made it okay to be critiqued in that venue. Of course, the best thing to do would be would certainly not be that somebody makes a whole YouTube video about it and never tries to comment or reach out to me directly or those kinds of things. But I'm not famous enough for that to happen, so that's fine. But
Yet. yet.
You have likely had some from time to time something like that go on, um, but so I think in principle, if I do see a comment like that, I do run across it. Um, I'm gonna first and foremost treat it the same in the sense that I do need to read it, and I do need to ask myself, is that right? Because my first goal, not as a pastor but as a Christian, is I need to grow, and I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. So, is this a legitimate criticism of me or of something that I've said? Um, and now, because it's not someone from my church, it's not someone that is part of the flock that God has given me to have oversight. Because of that, it's probably going to mean less to me, and that maybe sounds bad, right? But I certainly don't mean it to be. But but you, but I'm still going to take it into account and hear it. But us coming to, so let me say it this way, maybe what I mean by it means less to me is I really don't care as much about some internet person in the ether and I coming to terms and getting along afterward, right? But in my church, I mean, we have to do that. It's more of a forced thing. You have to maintain relationships and even grow closer together in those relationships. So you don't you at least in my view, I do not have that same level of obligation with someone I have no idea who they are on the internet from Kansas, you said, or whatever, right? It doesn't matter. And so I'll take the criticism. I might even say, hey, thanks for whatever. Or I might say, as nicely as possible, yeah, you're crazy, right? I don't know. It just depends on what's said. Um, but I think you, you take the criticism seriously. Okay. You, uh, you don't care about, like it should be easier to brush off your shoulders, right? Um, and then you react to them if you've again, like the first caveat being I don't really check that stuff. um, uh, and so that doesn't happen real often, but um, because the internet has a way of like it's just part of the culture to criticize everybody, right? um, it's just what you do, especially if you have X or Twitter. I mean, if you have that, that's what the whole culture is. It is nothing but you saying something and then getting slammed for it. Like that's what the whole
Yeah.
thing. The only time you can't do that is if you just share a verse, uh, legitimately from the scriptures. Then the only time you'll get criticism is when you share a verse that has to do with homosexuality or something. But um,
That's
uh,
about accurate. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. If I shared John 3:16 on the internet, it would be like, yeah, that's
Well, or no
fine.
one cares. They
But
just keep scrolling. They're like, oh, that
right.
doesn't hit my
Yeah.
outrage sensor today, so I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah. It okay, this is off topic, but it always surprises me. I guess it doesn't anymore, but it's like it makes me think about it, right? Whenever I could post all sorts of things on Facebook that nobody cares about, and it's always the Christian things, right? Like I could post a verse or a quote that's really good from like Spurgeon or somebody, um, and nobody really cares. So it might get like 2 people, but as soon as I share something about one of my kids, it's like boom, it blows up, and there are like 50 people or 60 people that like it, and all these things. Yeah, I always find that interesting. But
Gotcha.
so
So
there's my criticism
no, you're
for
good.
the internet.
So I think so. I think what the approach you have is really good in the sense that like the pastors that I know that have received, and again, these are not these are not like big, famous, well-known pastors. These are pastors that literally only stream on the internet because they started back during 2020 and they just keep doing it now. And there are random people that come in from nowhere that have somehow found the streams, and maybe just like from social media clips they post, and then they find it and they go watch it because whatever, people do that. And most of the feedback, or when I've had conversations with them about it, the feedback, whether it be good or bad, they just kind of like, okay. And it goes back to your approach, like you said before, like, you're not part of my local church. So like, I appreciate it, I guess, but it doesn't really impact them because they're kind of like, you're not here. Like, you're not part of the body. You're not, as far as the local body goes. I guess thanks for the criticism, even for the positivity, but it's just kind of like, okay, thanks. And I think that goes back, and a lot of this we don't have time to get into. A lot of this, I think, plays into your view of the local church. Like, do you see the internet people that watch out in Randoville as part of your local body or not? And that goes again back to the church. There's some churches that literally have, Elevation has an EFAM, and so their EFAM is equally, like, they count them as actual people on their attendance stuff when they put out their yearly reports. And so it's a matter of like, how do you view that? And does that criticism, I think how you view that views how you weigh that criticism. And almost all the pastors I know, they're like, I don't like, thanks, or who cares, as far as when the criticism comes in. And I think that goes back to what we've talked about before in regards to the source of where it comes from, right? There are pastors, and again, I'll speak to my very, very unique situation in which there are pastors that have like submitted copyright claims on sermon reviews I've done of them. Because I was critical of something they've said, not or Driscoll, that have just completely taken, the video down. And so, that's whatever. I mean, they're fair to do that. And then I have had pastors that have reached out. That wasn't anybody's name. I literally had to clear my throat there. There have been pastors that have reached out that have said, hey, I saw this clip because somebody sent it to me. And, I don't think you were necessarily fair in your estimation. Now, again, that's only happened once. And when it did, I had some other people listen to it that, again, that I knew would be, transparent and open with me about if I had done it right. And they got back to me and they said that I maybe probably wasn't as, I was a little overcritical. So we took that one down and did another one of this particular pastor. And that did change how I do things now. When I do the review, I send it to the pastor via DM or email, of whatever way I can get a hold of them, so they at least know it's out there. And what I always say, this isn't about you personally. This is about the sermon you gave and us kind of looking at the sermon, but I understand how it can be taken as personal. And I want you to know it's not. It's just that your name was submitted by somebody. We're looking at your sermon. If you have an issue with this, you can reach out to me. Because at this point, it's big enough to where people now care. But the point being is, considering the source. And that's what I told the pastor that reached out. Like this isn't about you. This isn't me. Like, I'm not a part of your church. I honestly don't think you should consider anything I say because I'm not there. But I think that does come down to the digital age where it goes like, consider the source. If anybody not that anybody's going to watch this, that's going to have a sermon review done about them. But if I do a sermon review about somebody, I want you to be like, I don't care about your opinion, because I don't think you should care about my opinion. I'm not part of your local church. I'm not involved in your local body. Again, I'm not even coming after that person. I'm just saying like, hey, let's look at how we should listen to sermons. And so I think for people that do have, and I hate this term because I don't consider myself this, but I get lumped in all the time, discernment ministries that constantly attack people. And all they do is show the negative, and all they do is go after clips. That's what did we say his name was? Hank. Those are the Hanks of the church, right? And unfortunately, whenever the Hanks of the church maybe do have like a really good take on something that people should pay attention to, people don't pay attention to it because Hank's been over here criticizing the whole time anyway. So all that to say that it's not, I don't think anybody outside of your local church should really be taken incredibly seriously. What you said, I think, is helpful, where you say, okay, I'll take in the criticism, but it's obviously weighted different for you, because
Yep.
like, I'll listen to you, but I don't really like, I'm not, unless somebody else in here within our local body has said it, I'm probably not going to really pay that much attention to it. And I just wanted to include that in this because I think in the digital age, it often goes outside of our church. And I just really want to make it clear that if somebody sees a sermon online that I preach and they're outside of my local body and they say something, I really don't care. I just don't about your opinion at all, because I got 5 pastors in my church that I trust to call me out on stuff if I do say something wrong. I have a lot of people within the church that I know are going to be super honest with me. So your opinion means nothing. Just be quite frank with you. But I think that has to be something you think through, because sometimes when you're online, if you get bombarded enough, that can matter to you. And I don't think it should. There's been pastors that I know that like a clip of theirs goes viral, and they're not like huge pastors, but a clip goes viral. And believe me, I know on the other side of the internet, you can get bombarded with negative stuff. And I would like, again, not that this podcast is going to go wide and far, but don't let that get you if that does happen. That opinion doesn't matter. Who are you called to shepherd? Are they being shepherded well? Are you building a community of people, like you said, that are maturing one another? I think that's the goal. Yeah. That's the point. And theirs are the opinions that matter. So,
yeah. And not only that, but when you think about it, just from a biblical perspective, there are a lot of people in our nation, okay, and our culture who would say, I'm a Christian, who are not, right? Who don't even fit a rudimentary definition of what a Christian is supposed to be. And so, and I think that the internet is absolutely filled with those people. And so I think, here's the point that I want to make with that. If you are faithful, if you're faithfully preaching, and that's what people see, if you're blunt about the truth and you're honest about what a text is saying and some of the implications with our culture, with family life, with whatever, criticism is really not only expected, but it's if you never get criticized, if people are assuming people see it, and if you don't get criticized, you're probably wrong. Like, that's probably a criticism in and of itself. But because if the internet doesn't have anything mean to say to you, then probably you weren't right.
Or you weren't on the internet. How can you get on the internet and people not be mean to you?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But like, it just like, I mentioned Twitter because it's I don't have a lot of experience dealing with what you're talking about, like the internet part. Because certainly people have seen my podcast some. I have some subscribers and things like that. But and so I've had some comments, but nothing like what you have or what you're talking about. Because I'm on the internet, but I'm not really on the internet. I'm on the internet as far as my people are concerned.
That's a good take. That's a good position to hold, Rob. Keep holding that position.
But if I'm the world should hate what I have to say. Let me say it that way, right? The world, and that includes people who are goats in the church, right? People who claim to be Christians but couldn't care less about their Bibles, like it for real. Who claim to be able to believe and yet not obey, right? Those kind of folks, and all the way up to those who are bluntly following anyone but Christ. It would be weird if they didn't have something to criticize in what I have to say. It probably would mean that I'm a little too fluffy, right? Or that I'm just or that I'm just playing to a crowd and trying to build people up without any interjection of truth. Like, the moral of that story is I want to make sure that that if I'm going to be online and there's some kind of presence there, I want to make sure that I'm not too sensitive to that, right? Because it's absolutely going to happen. In the local church, that should be a little different, right? Like you shouldn't receive all that kind of criticism, especially look, if people are sticking around in this church, it's because it's chiefly because they enjoy the blunt truth of the word being preached, right? So I don't have that issue here. Because those kind of folks will come for a Sunday and go, yep, not for me. Where's the Furtick church around here? Right. And so, because I want to be built up and have the energy to get through my week and come back. Right. So anyway, I'm sorry. You can,
No,
you don't have to.
Okay. So hopefully, this section where we're talking about criticism is helpful to you. If you're a pastor listening, I think there's plenty of stuff here that I think that hopefully has been helpful to you in order to kind of process through. Again, if you've been in ministry for a while, I think you've already come across all of this. Hopefully you've heard some things that maybe you haven't heard before, haven't considered, or maybe you think you can work into it as far as what Rob's talked about is his sort of system that they're doing. If you're new, hopefully it's just been encouraging to you in general. And if you're a congregant, I think one of the best things that I think you can take from this is what Rob, you said earlier, which is like just stepping back for a minute, becoming a mature believer and really thinking through, obviously I need to be critical for the sake of truth, but I need to really think through that criticism and how I approach it well. If you're never being critical, I think, again, you're not really thinking through things very well. But if you're being overcritical, I think you're having a knee-jerk reaction. So what we're really shooting for, in my opinion, is that middle ground of saying, I really do need to be listening carefully, and I really should be critical if something's said that's not right. But I need to kind of weigh that in the balances and know when to speak and when not to speak and when it's helpful and when it's not helpful to do so. And same as pastors, when should I listen and when should not? I should just brush it off. So hopefully that's been helpful to you guys as you've listened through this. And if you like it, you should probably maybe put that like button down. And if you don't like it, we don't want any feedback at all and you can leave. I mean, that's what we've really learned today. So hopefully,
yeah,
get
out of our lives.
Hopefully I'm being consistent. So guys, thank you, as always, for listening to the Babbling Pastor Podcast, the best podcast on the entire internet with your best host, Michael, and your other host, Rob.
Boy.
You had to be here from the beginning to get that joke. Mm-hmm. We'll talk to you next time. Bye. Bye-bye.
Later.
Hey guys, you made it through this whole section of the podcast. If you're looking for the whole thing not cut up into sections, you can search next to this video and the entire podcast should be there for you to view and enjoy, not in sections, but as the whole. Hopefully you guys have found this helpful, and we'll be back next week with a new podcast talking about, well, a secret subject, and I think you'll enjoy it. We'll talk to you later.